with special needs and the Egyptian designer behind them. Now, the International Monetary Fund says in a new report that the global economic activity is expected to contract 4.4% in 2020. That is from a 2.8% growth in 2019. Advanced economies will contract 5.8% this year, with the United States recording a negative 4.3% growth. The latest World Economic Outlook and growth projections sees China growing at 1.9% this year. Of course, leading economies in sub-Saharan Africa, Nigeria and South Africa are expected to contract by 4.3% and 8% respectively. Global growth is projected at 5.2% in 2021, and that's a little lower in the outlook released in June 2020. Meanwhile, the U.S. government has commenced the process of delisting Sudan from its list of state sponsors of terrorism. Now, the Sudanese government is calling for acceleration in the adjustment of its foreign exchange rate following that U.S. announcement. Here's CGTN's Daniela Pearson reporting.
The U.S. intention to remove Sudan from its list of state sponsors of terrorism has initiated responses within the Sudanese government. There's been calls for acceleration in the adjustment of the country's foreign exchange rate.
The adjustment of the foreign exchange rate in a quick time frame allows the Sudanese people working abroad to not suffer. That money that they send back home is not exchanged at a rate of 55 Sudanese pounds on the dollar. This is not fair to citizens. With the adjustment of the foreign exchange rate, we can guarantee that remittances will apply to the official banking rate.
Complying with the deal with President Trump's administration, Sudan transferred $335 million as compensation for the American victims of twin terrorist attacks on U.S. embassies in 1998. Being on the U.S. terrorism list bars Sudan from actively securing debt relief and external borrowing.
Sudanese financial institutions can re-establish banking ties with Western banks, especially those in the United States and Europe. For example, current efforts are targeting restarting a relationship with Citibank and reopening its offices that were once operating in Sudan, possibly by the onset of 2021.
Sudan is currently in the midst of an economic crisis which has accelerated since the overthrow of former President Omar al-Bashir last year.
The revolution happened, and after we removed Omar al-Bashir, we thought that we would be removed from the list. The decision came late. The country is at a difficult stage, only God knows. We don't know what this decision will do for us.
Thanks to U.S. sanctions going back to the 1990s, Sudan has been largely cut off from the international banking system.
Honestly, meat is expensive, vegetables are expensive. I hope that with this decision, our situation will improve and people can buy meat and vegetables and their lives would be better.
The Sudanese pound has gained on the black market to 220 against the dollar, from around 250. Following the announcement. The official exchange rate is around 55. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
Now, central bank digital currencies could replace traditional cash in cross-border payments in the near future. According to the International Monetary Fund, it will, however, be with proper safeguards. This was all part of a discussion in a seminar moderated by IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva. A distinguished group of panelists looked at the benefits and risks of cross-border use of digital currencies and, of course, their macro-financial implications.
We must improve existing systems and we must explore new ones, potentially taking advantage of central bank digital currencies. Coming up with new solutions could bring significant efficiency gains, but it could also affect monetary and financial stability. Widespread use of new forms of digital money could make it harder for country authorities to run independent monetary policy and control domestic financial conditions.
We are committed to carefully and thoughtfully evaluating the potential costs and benefits of a central bank digital currency for the U.S. economy and payment system, as well as for its international implications. We've been actively participating with other central banks and the BIS in that work, and we feel that that collaboration has been very productive. We have not made a decision to issue a CBDC, and we think that there's a great deal of work yet to be done, as well as extensive public consultation to be had with all stakeholders before making such a decision.
Now, of course, central banks across the world have been forced to give digital currencies a second look as they grow in popularity. A shift in spending habits coupled with the speed of technological developments means that crypto cannot be ignored much longer. While CGTN's Yasser Hakim reports that the central bank in Egypt is now mulling over its own cryptocurrency.
Calls of adopting digital currencies are growing daily. And after initially hesitating to embrace virtual money, central banks worldwide are increasingly beginning to weigh their options. The rise of Facebook's Libra currency is one of the reasons central banks are changing their stance. But there could be other benefits of adopting digital currencies.
First of all, the corona pandemic has revealed the advantages of cryptocurrencies, such as fast transactions, has a safe coded system in financial and currency exchange, as well as maintaining social distancing, and does not use paper currency, which we know can transmit the virus. Cryptocurrencies have finalized transactions of around $350 billion, which is a huge amount that countries would want a share of.
After it had earlier refused to consider the idea, the Egyptian Central Bank now says it is conducting a comprehensive study about the possibility of introducing the virtual money into the country's economy. However, one of the concerns is the instability of these currencies.
The value of the cryptocurrencies changes drastically in short periods. It could increase a lot and drop again quickly, making it unstable and unsafe for business. Unlike the US dollar, for example, that is more stable. Another concern is the use of digital currencies for money laundering, crimes and terrorism. There is no central authority that monitors transactions to prevent its misuse. These are issues being discussed globally by central banks, as well as other challenges, too, in implementation.
As for Egypt, many of the stock market investors are willing to transact in virtual currencies if they are adopted.
I can use it because it's fast, easy, and no need for cash or notes on me. It protects me from crime and facilitates purchases and transactions.
Experts and officials worldwide have cast their eyes on China. It is already trialing the virtual currency in the prominent business city of Shenzhen before going nationwide. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Now look at some corporate headlines. A payments company, PayPal, says it will allow customers to hold Bitcoin and other virtual coins in its online wallet and shop using cryptocurrencies. The new service makes PayPal one of the largest U.S. companies to provide consumer access to cryptocurrencies. The California-based company hopes the service will encourage global use of virtual coins and prepare its network for new digital currencies that central banks and companies may develop. And Netflix has posted its weakest subscriber gains in 4 years. Earnings per share also landed below analyst expectations at $1.74. Now, shares of Netflix dropped nearly 6% to $494 in trading on Tuesday. This has been attributed to an increase in streaming competition and the return of live sports to television. Meanwhile, the COVID-19 pandemic has boosted business for Logitech International. The Swiss-US computer company increased sales by 75% in its latest quarter and raised its profit guidance again. Now, Chief Executive Bracken Darrell says that long-term changes to home working and demand for video calls and, of course, esports has been accelerated by the pandemic and will remain relevant after the COVID-19 crisis eases. And finally, Manchester United slumped to a net loss of $30.3 million in the last financial year. This is due to the pandemic that disrupted fixture schedules and forced soccer clubs to play matches behind closed doors. Now, the English football club's revenue in the year ending in June fell 19% to $670 million, with some fixtures being delayed beyond that date. And that's a look at our corporate headlines. Well, we are heading into a short break now, still to come on the show. Zimbabwe's second stock exchange to be launched this Friday. And Egypt will be amongst the few nations expected to record economic growth this year.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global business, only on CGTN.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back. Well, let's go to Zimbabwe now. The country's education minister has directed schools to roll out online lessons amid an ongoing teachers' strike. But there are still concerns that online learning may not be as effective as a face-to-face teaching. Here's Farai Mwakutuya with a story.
Tembo Nashema Kumborenga is unhappy. She had to bring her daughter back home from boarding school because there are no teachers.
They spent the last 3 weeks doing nothing. They were just watching videos and playing all day.
As the stalemate over teachers' pay continues and with exams looming, parents are worried, but the government insists the show must go on.
The learning does not stop, has not stopped, and it is continuing. We are still on our online platforms. We're still having the radio lessons. We have had to distribute even physical copies and modules of self-study guides for those who did not have perhaps radio reception.
But not everyone is sold on the effectiveness of online learning.
When a student gets some of their answers incorrect, they need an explanation of where they went wrong, so the teacher needs to be there in person to do that. Also, my child might be on the phone texting their friends or watching videos instead of doing schoolwork. Lastly, I may not always have money to buy the data needed.
However, the school owner says there are appropriate technologies to cater for everyone.
I believe that WhatsApp can work in the rural areas, even deep in some of the underprivileged societies. They have that small phone. It's possible. So I don't think that really WhatsApp is a setup for the urban areas.
He's been using WhatsApp since schools were closed and intends to continue post-COVID-19.
I believe that as we move forward, I would not be running a full-time school myself. I would run or maybe a distance learning school where learners may come to school. I may need them maybe 2 days a week, and then 3 days they are doing online learning. It cuts on cost of transport to reduce pressure on our facilities.
Thousands of teachers have not reported for duty since the resumption of schools, citing financial incapacitation and want their salaries increased to counter soaring inflation. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Let's stay in the country. The Victoria Falls Stock Exchange has been allowed to launch and commence trading by its Securities and Exchange Commission. The official opening of VFAX is scheduled for this Friday, 23rd October, at its new offices in Victoria Falls. Now, trading, depository services, clearing and settlement on VFAX, however, will commence on 26th October. The Bourse is a subsidiary of the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange and will trade exclusively in foreign currency. So far, over 80 firms in the financial and capital markets have expressed interest to participate in the VFAX exchange. Now, the International Monetary Fund has revised upwards growth projections for Egypt. The lender says the North African nation will achieve a 3.5% economic growth this year from an earlier projection of 2%, which was made in June. Now, Egypt then will be one of just 3 Middle Eastern and Central Asian economies that will escape contraction this year. From Cairo, here's Yasser Hakim with the details.
More positive news on Egypt's economic performance during the corona pandemic. The country has naturally faced a drop in revenue, a huge strain on the budget, and economic growth half of the pre-COVID 6% target. Yet results so far are better than most countries in the continent and the region.
In my view, the main success came as Egyptian financial institutions and the government worked hand in hand to take a balanced approach to the outbreak of the virus. A partial lockdown was placed. At the same time, production went into full throttle while maintaining health procedures to keep the economy open. This was unlike many countries in Europe or the US or Turkey that did not manage to balance both sides early on, which led to acute contraction of the economies.
The Deutsche Bank report says the growth is supported by government spending, an expansion in the ICT and energy sectors, growth in net exports, and the mega construction and infrastructure projects funded by the state.
If we look at Egypt, there are a variety of sources of revenue that create growth for the economy. The Suez Canal, tourism, aviation, industries, service sectors, expatriate remittances, treasury bills. It's a variety that can sustain you in a recession, unlike some economies that depend on one source, such as petroleum or oil and gas. If it drops, the economy breaks down.
Direct foreign investments have increased as well by 11% year-on-year amidst the pandemic, raking in more hard currency. Going forward, the IMF and Deutsche Bank reports have agreed that Egypt will continue a gradual recovery as growth rates would reach 5.8% by 2025. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Now, tech and innovation experts met online for the Singularity U South Africa Summit. The annual event allows experts from around the world to discuss and share their knowledge and experience about solutions to socio-economic problems that plague our world. Sumitra Naidu was there and finds out more about this year's discussions.
Climate change, adverse weather, water, sanitation, poverty, and food are just some of the topics being discussed at this year's Singularity Youth Summit. Experts are pushing the use of more technologies and new innovation to help solve these pressing issues.
When it comes to water in particular, and there's a leak that's non-revenue water and that nobody's aware of, not even the municipality, for all its intelligence, is aware of. So with just technology, we give municipalities the ability to, in real time, know when a leak has happened, fix that leak so that that water doesn't just disappear.
For South Africa, rising unemployment remains a crisis. Poor education has always been a sore point for the ruling party, but many argue that traditional academics is no longer the answer.
You don't need a high level of education to use IoT. You don't need a high level of education to use the cloud or AI. These technologies are now getting to a point where practical supersedes intelligence, if you want to call it that.
New skills are proving beneficial in some parts.
The little secret about artificial intelligence is that it needs a lot of data in order for the algorithms to work correctly. And the machine doesn't know what a cat looks like. It needs a human to look at 1 million photos of a cat and tell the machine this is a cat. And that is an incredible job that's coming into the world, is data labeling.
A lot of these technologies are well suited, in my belief, to Africa. It's because we don't have money. For example, we have worked with plumbers. They are now have made themselves digital plumbers. And what that does for the people in the household is now you're able to get daily readings of your water, so you better use your water.
We cannot wait to, be at a position where things have fallen apart before we resort to leveraging technology. Technology is an enabler. It will enable us achieve a lot, especially in reimagining the future. Our leaders have to drive that.
Only time will tell how the 4IR will play out in South Africa. Investment is in short supply and corruption is endemic. The country needs political will. Sumitra Nadu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
And still in the country, South Africa has joined a host of other nations for a long-term study to assess the sustainable development of the Atlantic Ocean. Now, the, in quotes, Mission Atlantic study by the International Horizon 2020 will see ocean experts from South Africa, Europe, Brazil, and Canada analyze current and future risks to the Atlantic ecosystem, such as climate change and overfishing. CGTN's Travis Andrews with more from Cape Town.
The Atlantic Ocean spans more than 106 million square kilometers and is the second largest of the world's oceans. It's also an important ecosystem for different industries, including global trade and fishing. It's now, though, about to undergo a thorough assessment as part of the Mission Atlantic case study, being carried out by some of the world's top marine scientists. They will try to determine the impact issues such as climate change, natural hazards, and human activity are having on the Atlantic Ocean's ecosystem.
South African ecosystem. How are those, what are the effects on our ecosystems? How are they interlinked with other pressures that are being exerted on our system? For example, climate change, mining, eutrophication, so pollution. All of those things put pressure on our systems. So we're identifying things that are putting our ecosystem at risk and then solutions for those.
South Africa's Southern Benguela will form the basis of a local case study that will look into issues such as sustainable fisheries management, as well as the role climate change has on endangered African penguin colonies. Using an integrated ecosystem assessment, ocean experts will paint a very detailed picture on the current risks facing the Atlantic Ocean and the proposed solutions that are meant to inform key decision and policy makers.
This whole integrated ecosystem assessment is going to be very beneficial because it's going to get stakeholders on board from across these different users, from governance to policymakers to the actual scientists on the ground, and try to get everybody on board.
The Mission Atlantic team is also set to use an ecosystem approach to fisheries so that the study can assess not just fisheries resources, but all the ecosystem's marine resources, including predators and plankton. The study is also set to conclude in the middle of 2025, making it quite an exhaustive research project. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
Well, let's now go back to one of our top stories today. In Zimbabwe, the Victoria Falls Exchange will launch and commence trading this Friday, the 23rd of October, at its new offices in Victoria Falls. Trading, depository services, clearing and settlement on VFX, however, will commence on the 26th of October. Well, let's dig into the details with Farai Mwakutoya. He joins us now in Harare. Great to have you with us on the show today, Farai. Now, as we just mentioned, trading kicks off next week. Do we know yet which firms are going to list on this new exchange and, of course, cross-list from the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange? And are its operational guidelines clear yet?
Well, Uche, indeed, we do have some indications that have come through in the last week or so of companies that will be listing on that exchange. We certainly know that Seedco, which is a Pan-African seed manufacturer, has stated intention to list on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, being the first one. We know that a gold mining company, Caledonia Mining, has also indicated that it will list. And it is also highly anticipated that the two other counters that were suspended on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange, that is PPC Cement as well as Old Mutual, will also follow suit and list on that new Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. The guidelines were gazetted a few weeks ago. I spoke to some investment managers today. They are raring to go. There is an opportunity for companies that are listed on the main Zimbabwe Stock Exchange to participate on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, but to a limit of 20% of their market capitalization. So I think in terms of the T's being crossed and I's being dotted, that is all in order. I think what we're waiting to see now is, who will come to the party. Certainly, the authorities here and people in the industry are expecting that mining companies and mining houses who need hard currency to expand production and, for investment will be the major players on this Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, Uche.
Now, of course, there are a lot of questions about this new exchange, partially because we know the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange did stop trading for about 5 weeks for many reasons. One, it said that it was partially because of claims that share prices were being used as a proxy rate for the US dollar Zimbabwean dollar rate. Now, how has this issue affected investor confidence? And certainly, are there any guarantees that this time around it will not be shut down?
Well, Uche, certainly speaking to investment managers, brokers and traders, they say that since the trade resumed following that suspension, they have seen a lot of foreign investors exit the market, particularly from blue chip counters. And that is on the back of the sentiment and confidence that took a knock because of that abrupt and impromptu closure. So certainly it has had an effect in terms of affecting investor confidence. Already people here were jittery in terms of currency issues and currency stability, whether they are able to repatriate their profits. A lot of those funds were locked in the country and investors couldn't get their dividends because of the currency issues that Zimbabwe has been having. Now, in terms of guarantees to investors, the authorities have been at pains to assure investors that, this time around there will be consistency. The central bank has agreed with the stock exchange in terms of settlement, in terms of the modus operandi, that trade will be in US dollars, settlement will be in US dollars, payment of dividends will be in US dollars. So there is that certainty that is being given to these investors. Obviously, there is a concern around whether or not this may happen again in terms of consistency. But I think, authorities here, the end game, Uche, of this Victoria Falls Stock Exchange is to convert Victoria Falls into an African offshore investment center, like we see in Guernsey, for instance. And if the authorities here want to achieve that, then they have to get this first step of the dollar-denominated stock exchange right. And I think that will be an incentive for them to be transparent, to be consistent, and not to bring any surprises that may make investors jittery or anxious and lead to a flight of capital. So yes, there are those concerns, but authorities here are saying that there's nothing to worry about. This time around, there will be a lot more consistency and predictability. So we'll wait to see how that goes.
Well, it launches this Friday, so we'll certainly wait to see how that goes, and we'll have more discussion with you on that, Farai, going forward. Of course, that's Farai Mwakutuya joining us there in Harare, Zimbabwe. Now you're watching Global Business Africa. We're going to take a short break now, but still to come on the show. The European Union to launch legal action against Cyprus and Malta over their golden passport schemes. And virus protection gear dominates this year's Design of the Year competition.
taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time, it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Over the last 14 hours of rain.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are these stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Now, a quick recap of other headlines this hour. The governor of Lagos in Nigeria says that authorities are investigating the death of one person who suffered blunt trauma to the head during anti-police protests on Tuesday. At least 25 people were wounded. Some protesters have broken a round-the-clock curfew, which was imposed on Tuesday after soldiers were accused of opening fire on Nigerians protesting against police brutality in Lagos. Meanwhile, alleged Rwandan genocide financier Felicien Kabuga is to be temporarily transferred to The Hague for a medical assessment. That's according to the UN tribunal in charge of his case. Kabuga's lawyers had asked that he be transferred to The Hague instead of Arusha in Tanzania, saying long-haul air travel would pose a health risk to the 85-year-old businessman because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And Burundi's ex-president Pierre Buyoya says that he rejected a life sentence he received in absentia this week. He was sentenced over the 1993 assassination of his successor. Now, Buyoya is dismissing the case as politically motivated. According to a court ruling, Buyoya was convicted for an attack against then head of state, President Melchior Ndadaye. And the UN's Libya envoy is optimistic on ceasefire talks between Libya's warring factions. Speaking at a news conference, Stephanie Williams said the two sides had agreed to maintain the current state of calm on the front lines and avoid any military escalation. And that is a recap of today's top headlines. Now, the European Union is set to launch legal action against Cyprus and Malta over their investor citizenship programs, also known as golden passport schemes. The project allows wealthy foreigners to buy citizenship in exchange for an investment of around $1.2 million in Malta and $2.4 million in Cyprus. The European Commission says the decision was taken because the two member states granted nationality and thereby EU citizenship without requiring a genuine link with the country. The Commission also sent a letter to Bulgaria raising concerns about its passport for sale scheme.
Today, as you have seen, the European Commission is launching infringement procedures against Cyprus and Malta by issuing letters of formal notice regarding their investor citizenship schemes, also referred to as golden passports. The Commission considers that the granting of citizenship for predetermined payments or investments without any genuine link with the member state concerned undermines the essence of EU citizenship.
Now, the global tech front is currently a major battlefield, and China especially faces complex international challenges. Those are the words of China's Science and Technology Minister. He was speaking at a news conference in Beijing on Wednesday. CGTN's San Juan has more.
The Chinese government says science and technology constitute the nation's primary productive forces. In plain English, that means they are important, very important, to China's continued growth and development. It's an idea that's inspired decades of technological advances in China. And as the country looks back on the 13th five-year plan and everything it's achieved over the past half a decade, a few numbers stand out. In the Global Innovation Index, released by the World Intellectual Property Organization, from 2015 to 2020, China jumped from 29th to 14th place.
China has had technological development and has taken opening up measures. It has also been benefiting from them. China is also a collaborator and contributor to international cooperation and technological advancements.
China's gross spending on research and development reached more than 2.2 trillion yuan in 2019. That's around $33 billion, and nearly double the figure from 2015. It's a number that accounts for more than 2.2% of the country's GDP. But on the global tech front, challenges remain. Minister Wang acknowledged as much when responding to a question put to him by CGTN.
The collaboration has been playing a major role across the globe, but the sector has turned into a major battlefield. We do recognize that. Many Chinese high-tech companies and scientists are being discriminated against overseas. But no matter what, technological development requires international cooperation.
Minister Wang says China will further open up its technology sector for further cooperation with global partners. He says the country will take into account both its development and security, and maintain a fair and open working environment for scientists in the field, spearheading even more innovation. Chen Ziyuan, CGTN, Beijing.
And moving on now, the food industry has opened its doors to new technologies and app-based services that have led to a transformation in how the sector operates. Now, reports say that funding in agri-food tech skyrocketed to $19.8 billion in 2019, and that's from $2.9 billion in 2012. Technologies changing the industry include blockchain, augmented and virtual reality, as well as AI-based chatbots. Blockchain apps can strengthen food management by tracing and recording transactions to maintain safety and quality. Creative food images have become less important thanks to the introduction of augmented reality and virtual reality. Now, food apps are using AI-based chatbots to connect with their consumers. The future of food tech is now directed towards becoming more intelligent and personalized with the help of analytics and machine learning technologies. Now, the global tourism industry has been hit hard by the ongoing coronavirus pandemic. Many people have been forced to holiday in their own countries or have chosen to stay at home. Well, the health crisis has had a devastating impact on airlines, hotels, as well as tour operators. But some businesses have benefited from the staycation trend. CGTN's Johannes Piesberger reports from Slovenia.
For hundreds of years, Alpine dairymen made cheese from soured milk, but the tradition has been dying out across the region in the face of competition from faster, newer techniques. In one corner of Slovenia, a small collective of herdsmen who had been struggling to prevent the craft becoming lost have received an unexpected boost during the coronavirus pandemic. To encourage domestic tourism, the government offered vouchers worth $230 to citizens who chose a vacation at home. Many decided to spend their time and money at Velika Planina, the place where, according to legend, sour cheese is said to make girls fall in love.
The shepherds in the past, they were making these cheeses for engaged girls. And each shepherd has his own marker, some love symbols in it, and then it was nicer for a girl.
Young shepherd Jan Potočnik has a very special friend in the settlement, 92-year-old Reska Mali, who is passing on the tradition of producing Trnic cheese to younger generations.
I was taught by an old woman myself on how to make the cheese. That woman was the only one who knew how to do it, and she also knew how to cut out these wooden cheese stamps.
For This our cheese niche. We must leave the milk few days that it becomes sour, and then we have sour milk. And from sour milk we make cottage cheese. And then we make these shapes, yeah, and then leave for 1 or 2 weeks to dry, and then the water goes out and it's dry cheese like a parmesan.
Then your cheese is losing shape. Take more cheese from the bowl. Otherwise, you have to start again from scratch. Just redo it.
But life in the shepherd settlement was not always peaceful.
All the huts were destroyed when World War II started. The Nazis burned the whole settlement down.
After the war, these special partly cone-shaped huts were slowly rebuilt. And now Jan Potocznik plans to turn some of them into guest accommodation. As many Alpine traditions, like the Trnitz cheese, struggle to survive, it is the authentic combination with tourism that can continue to keep them alive. Johannes Blešberger, CGTN, Velika Planina, Slovenia.
Now, there is a saying in Japan, you can't get far in work without drinking alcohol. There's even a word for drinking with colleagues, in quotes, nominication. It is a mix of the Japanese word for drinking and the English word for communication. But a new bar in Tokyo is now challenging that culture. Here's Grace Lee reporting.
It's a scene you often see in Tokyo's trendy Roppongi district, an upscale bar with Instagrammable cocktails. But one aspect sets this place apart from others in the area.
We wanted to create a space where people can enjoy the atmosphere, music and culture, even without alcohol.
0% non-alcoholic experience is Japan's first non-alcoholic bar, catering to a new generation of teetotalers in Japan.
Here in Tokyo, there are more and more young people who don't want to drink alcoholic beverages, and they don't want to be pressured to drink what we call alcoholic harassment. I think there will be growing demand for this kind of bar in Japan in the near future.
According to Japan's health ministry, heavy drinking is falling among younger people in the country. Data shows they may be drinking only about half as much as the same age group were a decade earlier. On the other hand, demand for non-alcoholic or low-alcoholic drinks has been on the rise. According to Suntory Holdings, a beverage company, the market for them has quadrupled in the past 10 years.
An important reason for this is poverty among young people. After Japan's bubble economy burst, we saw a huge rise in non-permanent workers. Their earnings weren't enough, so they couldn't enjoy drinking, and the culture of drinking in general has been fading away.
It may also be a matter of preference. Many non-drinkers say they prefer the taste of non-alcoholic drinks, while others cite health or wellness reasons. Companies in the beverage industry are catering accordingly.
I used to really like drinking, but I can't drink like I used to because of my age. So I've been waiting for a non-alcoholic bar, and it's finally here.
0% drinks were crafted by Shingo Gokan, a famous Japanese bartender.
So this is the bar's signature drink. It's called in Japanese zero ni naru, which means to become zero. And it's made of apple juice, vetiver, maple syrup, basil, and a hint of lemon. Let's give it a try. It's really good.
And even without the alcohol, the bar still aims to deliver a similar experience.
There are different elements here to make it feel as if you're drinking, like the loud bar music, the taste of the drinks, and the curved mirror which makes everything look distorted, just like when you're drunk.
Staff are hoping the space can serve as a refuge for those who struggle with Tokyo's heavy drinking culture. Grace Lee, CGTN, Tokyo.
Meanwhile, virus protection gear is dominating this year's Design of the Year competition in London. A self-sanitizing door handle and an emergency kit are amongst those entries. Let's check it out.
The Judy Emergency Kit has everything you need to survive a catastrophe. It is one of the entrants at the Design of the Year competition, now on show at London's Design Museum. All the nominees were designed between January 2019 and January 2020, just before the world was hit by the biggest emergency of a generation, the coronavirus pandemic. Many of the items on display seem prophetic, especially this 3D printed facial visor and the self-sanitizing door handle.
The kind of cause of the virus is obviously in dispute, but I think we all agree that the Earth is facing there is an environmental crisis. We are looking really at a kind of short-term crisis in the environment, and in many cases there are exhibits here that deal with environmental issues.
The exhibition covers a range of areas: fashion, architecture, digital, transport, product, and graphic design. One of the world's most famous and elusive artists also made an appearance, or he stab-proof Vestas. This item was designed by Banksy and worn by rapper Stormzy during his headline performance at the Glastonbury Festival.
I mean, one of our really significant exhibits is the stab vest that's designed by Banksy, worn by Stormzy at Glastonbury, and it's a kind of caricature of a John Bull waistcoat, you know, the Union Jack waistcoat worn, and instead it's a sort of black and white Union Jack worn on a stab-proof vest, which Stormzy wore at Glastonbury during the height of the knife crime crisis, a crisis that has not yet gone away.
The exhibition is made up of more than 70 items. Each category will be judged by experts in the field. But despite curating this annual exhibition, King is now very interested in the competitive side of the event.
The whole competition element of this doesn't really grab me. For me, this is much more a complete portrait of what design can do and what can mean. You know, going from choreography to a chair and going through sort of all sorts of digital things. So in a sense, you know, it's a very, very broad field, but a good design is something that makes sense for the context it's in. It's kind of somehow creating some kind of form, be it even digital form or protocol, to really create change in the world.
The exhibition runs until March 28, 2021 at the Design Museum in London. Lin Lin, CGTN.
And in Beijing, a number of cinemas have been refitted to make moviegoing a more accessible experience, particularly for the visually impaired. CGTN's Liu Xiaxin tells us now.
Wang Jiang had to undergo surgery a few years ago for her glaucoma.
After the operation, I was almost blind in my left eye. I experienced a little light sensitively. My right eye is nearsighted, but I'm kind of used to it now.
Films and TV programs began to fade out of Wang's life until today. But being back in the movie theater, she says it all feels familiar and different as well. Scenes without lines or dialogues are filled with a voice recording that describes the images and actions on screen. It's been a volunteer project by some professors and students from the Communication University of China since 2017.
There are more than 17 million visually impaired people in China. They could use some enriching activities besides being able to meet their daily needs. We are adapting 104 movies each year in order to be able to offer them 2 movies to watch per week.
There are currently 4 cinemas in Beijing's Chaoyang district that can cater to the visually impaired. We hope going to the movies can become a regular activity for them.
At present, more than 200 films with audio descriptions are available in 32 provinces and regions across China. In many cities, there are special roads to help blind people navigate the world. Now the volunteers want to light a path to the heart for those in need. Liu Jiaxin, CGTN, Beijing.
And shifting focus now, a quick look at commodity markets today. Oil prices easing. We saw Brent crude up almost 2% today. And that's after a surprise build-up in U.S. crude stockpiles stoked some concern about a global supply glut. Also, a spike in global COVID-19 cases continues to fuel that fear of a slower recovery in fuel demand. Meanwhile, gold prices rising today on a falling U.S. dollar. Optimism that U.S. legislators could reach an agreement on a pre-election coronavirus relief package did help to lift risk appetite today, and that sent the dollar index to a 1-month low. Now, benchmark copper, on the other hand, continues to climb. It has raced up more than 50% from 4-year lows touched in March. and that has been fueled by Chinese stimulus spending. Let's take a short break now, still coming up. The Egyptian tailor who's enabling people with special needs to dress to impress.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Aden, Djibouti, Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg,
Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Now, Uber, the cab hailing service, has expanded its offering in South Africa to include an app-based, over-the-counter medicines delivery service. Uber is working in conjunction with local pharmaceutical and medical supply company, Medicare. Now, Angela Coppola has more on that story.
Analysts in the online tech environment were expecting the hailing service to look at diversifying into other market segments, especially during lockdown. It's seen as an attempt to gain market share from established pharmaceutical companies in South Africa.
Some of the pharmacy companies themselves had entered that space. Dis-Chem, for example, introducing a bicycle delivery service. Clicks also managing to continue operating during lockdown thanks to being able to deliver pharmaceutical products. So once you add those success stories, firstly the massive global success story of Uber Eats, and then the success of local pharmacy deliveries, it was obvious that Uber would start expanding into those delivery areas as well.
Uber is now being likened to a courier company with this expansion into medicines. It's been driven by a need for a wide range of on-demand services from consumers.
It seems to be taking it segment by segment. So from food to medicine and now to pet food. So it'll probably prove that it can deliver pet food on demand. And after pet food, there's no telling what it can deliver next. We might find that you can order clothes through Uber.
The South African operation has had some success in branching out into other areas.
Uber Eats partnered with many small players, including grocery delivery services during lockdown, that gave Uber drivers, as well as some of these grocery entrepreneurs, a bit of a lifeline.
The cab hailing company is known for its ability to move quickly into market segments that it's not dominant in. This is just another instance of that. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And a designer in Egypt is now catering to people with special needs by designing clothes that fit and work for them. Such groups have for a very long time suffered a lack of options in commercial retail stores.
Ashgan Al-Abhar decided to launch a clothing brand for people with disabilities and those of short stature. Earlier this year, she started Metfazal Leak, which is Arabic for Tailored for You, a clothing line that she says is the first of its kind in Egypt.
The first struggle in this industry is for us to change our perception of people struggling with disabilities and to stop associating them with something related to charity or charity work, as if they are people who are unable to pay for a product or the price of the service being offered. It is a great challenge to change society's mental image of the disabled.
Our idea is simply based on accessibility, for the service to not only be available with us, but in all brands and all stores and all services catering to those with disabilities.
After working with various companies on ways to cater for people with disabilities, Al-Abhar noticed that they were not being served by clothing manufacturers.
People with short stature and disabilities, when I go to shops, I don't see anything particularly made for them. There is no special department for those with disabilities. So this was one of the things that really affected me. I wish I could go to a lot of stores like all people do and shop anywhere. They also have the right to go into any store and find things made for them because they are a big and influential part of our community.
She's now using volunteers to test the clothes, giving them free samples ahead of a planned commercial launch. One volunteer, Ziad Hamdi, now has hook and loop fasteners instead of buttons, which he says save him a lot of time and effort.
One example is that at first I couldn't use my hands well while getting dressed. This tailoring helped me, and now I get dressed much easier.
And while this is a breakthrough for people living with disabilities in Egypt, there's a need for more brands like Metfazal Leak.
I wish there would be stores for people with short statures. I wish I could shop for sizes such as medium or large, just like everyone else.
Al-Abhar hopes the initiative will help change views about people with disabilities and persuade the public to stop associating them with charity. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
And before we leave you today, let's take a quick look at Africa's currencies. South Africa's rand rallying 1.2% today, set for its biggest gain in 3 weeks and climbing to a 1-month high. That's as investors bet on more progress in those U.S. stimulus talks. In Nigeria, the naira depreciated against the dollar at the parallel market. That's despite another round of forex allocation to Bureau de Changes by the central bank. Now, the currency has been hit hard as businesses have been shut down due to the outbreak of violence in some parts of the country, including the capital, Lagos. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.